Hi, welcome to Energy Explained Behind the Headlines. And what we do in this channel is we take headlines we see in the news about energy or potentially economics, and we discuss them. And we have, in the father-son team, we have an energy expert, Vikram Rao, my father, who has a PhD from Stanford Engineering. He's the former Chief Technology Officer of Halliburton, so certainly speaks with authority in all matters energy. I myself have a PhD in economics, but we probably won't use that skill for now, right? I'm just this sort of bootleg MC, right? So today, we're going to talk about a recent headline, which is General Motors is not going to be producing consumer vehicles with internal combustion engines past 2035. They're going to be all electric 2035 and onwards. And the concept I want to talk to you about is we've been hearing about electric vehicles for a while. They've existed for over 100 years. I remember taking a ride in one when I was 8 years old, test vehicle. And yet it still seems dollar for dollar you're going to pay more for the same featured vehicle. Yet GM seems to think by 2035 that either won't be the case or it is still the right decision to do this. Now, what are all the factors involved in the cost for electric vehicle? Why are they still more expensive today than their internal combustion counterparts? And how do you see that playing out? That's the concept. But why don't you sort of start with what are the main aspects of the cost structure of an electric vehicle?
Right. So electric vehicle is missing some expensive items which the internal combustion vehicle has. So electric vehicle does not have the internal combustion engine. It does not have a drivetrain. It doesn't have a gearbox.
Yeah.
So it does not have a number of things. But it's got one very expensive item called the battery pack. And that has been the determining factor why the cost has been so high. Typically, each mile you can drive about in a quarter of a kilowatt hour you drive a mile. Now, what's a kilowatt hour? It is what you pay in your electricity rates. You call them a unit, okay? And you pay whatever you pay. You pay €5 a unit. That's what they call a unit. That's a kilowatt hour. Each kilowatt hour will drive you about 4 miles. So if you want a 100-mile range, you need about 25 kilowatt hour battery, but you really need 30 because you need to top it up. Okay. So a 30 kilowatt hour battery 10 years ago cost $30,000.
Okay.
$30,000.
Okay.
The whole rest of the car didn't cost that much.
Yeah, of course.
So that was a non-starter. It was just a boutique at that point.
Yeah.
Now, today, we are headed towards $100. Elon Musk of Tesla.
$100 for what now? $100 for a 30 kilowatt?
For kilowatt hour, yeah.
Per kilowatt hour, okay.
So that means that the battery pack would now, the 30 kilowatt hour battery pack would be $3,000, which is very reasonable considering the rest of the car probably cost $20,000.
So sorry, does that mean you want to add 100 miles, you add $3,000? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you need a $3,000 battery pack to be able to drive 100 miles. Now, if you want to do 200 miles, it becomes larger, but it's probably a bigger vehicle, which the other parts cost
It's not necessarily linear scaling because the battery gets big and so forth, but from a cost perspective, it's gone from 30,000 for that 30 kilowatt hour battery to 3,000. So it's a factor of 10x decrease over the past 10 years. How do you see that going forward?
Right. So, and the 3,000 offsets against some things that are not there that I mentioned.
Right. They don't have a gearbox. There's no catalytic converter. There's none of this stuff. There's no exhaust manifold. All of that stuff costs money. It costs the maintenance costs. That factors in too. But even at this price point we're currently at, would you not agree that if you were buying a car today, feature for feature, you're probably going to pay a little more for an electric vehicle? Do you agree with that statement, or am I wrong about that?
I agree with it only in as much as that is what the car companies are doing right now.
Okay.
My view, when they learn to get it all right, they should be able to produce within the next couple of years at most an electric vehicle of the same features for the same cost as an internal combustion engine vehicle.
And what type of range do you think that vehicle would have?
So that range would have about 100 miles, but for another, by that time, another $3,000, you could add another 100 miles. So at 200 miles, it's becoming interesting.
So we're at the tipping point for a city driver, city person situation. We're nearing the tipping point for a commuter driver, long commuter. And we're a little further off for a recreational vehicle that I use for long distance. But let's talk about charging stations, fast charging stations. we've always heard chicken and egg problem with these infrastructure type deals. But one of the observations I have from economic history is, it doesn't really work that way, because what you have is a dedicated audience that's an early adopter. That leads to the infrastructure enhancements that are good enough for your second wave of adopters. And it kind of works. It just takes some time. How do you see that playing into these tipping points? Because you're saying, hey, we've already tipped for, say, a city vehicle in 2 years. But how do you see that playing in for that longer range? Because you just said you can't, you want 1,000 miles range. We're still talking about a $20,000 battery even in a few years' time. And that's not going to make sense, right?
Yeah, so 1,000 miles range nobody's asking for, because even gasoline engines have 250, 300 mile range. So let's talk about 250, 300. The key to it is charging stations.
Yeah.
And there's two solutions to that. The one, what I would call the conventional solution, is fast charging. And I call it conventional because I'm going to give you another one which is highly unconventional.
Got it. Conventional means what other people have said. Now you have your Vikram Rao one you're going to throw at us. Got it. Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Got
okay.
It.
So the conventional solution is well on its way. There's some very new technology called wide band gap semiconductors, which have allowed.
Can you say it again for viewers? Wide band gap semi. It's the first time I'm hearing it. So it goes a little, okay, wide band gap semiconductors. You heard it here first. Wide band gap. Yes. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. So that enables fast charging.
Got
okay. And when I say fast, I mean 10, 15 minutes for a full top up.
Okay.
And then you wouldn't do a full top up, because no battery likes to get completely drained. It's just one of those things. Don't drain even your cell phone battery all the way. It just, you will notice it charges up very slowly in the beginning.
Interesting. I always thought that was just something people said to kids, and I just ignored it up until this moment. I didn't realize that was actually a fact. Okay, so that's actually a fact. And so you wouldn't always have it completely empty. So you're saying like 10 minutes, you got 200 more miles. It takes 5 minutes to fill up a gas tank. You're like, well, at that point, that's the tipping point for you.
You're right. And then you could be in a shopping center, and so you're not even wasting your time sitting in a gas station. Okay, so there's a number of ways to do it. The other is we have to be cognizant that a number of people don't live in single family dwellings. Okay?
That's true. Yeah.
And so
we don't
you need charging that's not in a garage.
Yeah.
Right. You need charging that does not need a garage.
Yeah.
So charging is the big deal tipping point. First the battery cost, and then charging. And then the thing that I advocate, which is in my latest book, which I'm not going to plug, I'm just mentioning it.
We'll put it in the link. We'll put it in link below.
Is called battery swapping. A guy called Shea Agassi, Israeli guy, came up with the idea in 2008. It was just too early.
Okay.
And what battery swapping is you don't charge the batteries. You just swap them out. And
yeah, like your gas for your grill, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it can be done. And in fact, Elon Musk, who didn't much care for Agassi's idea, nevertheless, when he brought out, which one was it, Tesla 6 or something, the sedan, when he demonstrated it on the dais, he said, okay, it's been 6 minutes and the battery packs have been replaced. And what they were doing is under the dais, they were replacing the battery packs. And that's probably what will happen. You'll go into a gas station on a bit of a ramp or a hole in the ground.
So it's fast charging or swaps. So let me ask, so that's out there for sure. But of course, the future, I think with manufacturing, one of my observations from the economic side is that we overestimate to some extent how quickly you can start mass producing things economically, because we've been producing internal combustion in cars for 130 years. So, 110 years. But, and so we overestimate how quickly we can get there. But with some time and the economies of scale catch up. So what you're saying is the batteries were a blocker, the batteries are no longer a blocker. The prices will fall. You have clear line of sight. There's a lot of expensive stuff that's not in the car that will save money. And for a city driver, we've already reached the tipping point with the manufacturing economies of scale. And you believe, now how do you see it? Are those city drivers going to help propel forward that fast charging infrastructure because we have reached a tipping point with a certain segment? Or do you think the government or some other entities need to step in with these fast charging stations, provided the swap startups and so forth aren't there yet? What do you think is the right recommendation there from a policy perspective?
I think from a policy, it's the government, I would say, because an enabler. They could even give no interest-free loans or something. Yeah. But the point is, the government's got to provide the incentive to do the fast charging.
Yeah.
And then it'll have a life of its own at that point. And going back to your point about the vehicle manufacturer, I can't remember now, but I think electric car has a dramatically fewer overall parts.
Yeah, yeah, I've read that.
So the whole supply chain
Yeah.
is easier. So it is the direction to go, but the fast charging is almost certainly a hurdle that has to be crossed. Yes.
And now we know some Northern European companies or countries have now crossed, I think, about half the vehicles sold. I live here in the Netherlands, where we have almost half the new vehicles sold are electric. So what we're speaking about here is not hypothetical, right? Like we have reached a major tipping point. Now these countries do have economic incentives that are fueling these programs that are not present everywhere. But what you're saying is, even without economic incentives, within the next 5 years, when you're buying a new vehicle, you don't expect consumers to be facing a choice of pay more for the electric that's better for the environment versus get the internal combustion engine for less money. You actually believe in the next 5 years that won't be a choice you face. More, you'll be thinking, will I be able to fast charge it to go on a cross-country road trip? That may not be possible without potentially either some intervention or some fast developing startup ideas that you're mentioning.
Yeah, that's right. And one other thing I would say, that there are some people who say that an electric car has zero tailpipe emissions, but how dirty is the electricity?
Right.
Now in Northern Europe, that you have a very good situation there. You got a lot of wind energy, you got hydroelectric and so forth. But nevertheless, I want to give you a statistic that most of the public doesn't know.
Interesting.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that is that an electric car, mine to wheel, the whole time spectrum of the mine or the oil field to the wheel, it uses 1/3 the energy that an IC engine uses.
Right.
1/3. So in a sense, it doesn't matter how gray or green the electricity is, because you're only using 1/3.
Well, you're not going to do worse than creating a small sort of fire in the hood of your car, right? Which is that's how you're making the power, right? So you're just better off producing that at a centralized location. And those efficiencies you get from that are so big, because effectively you have to do all the combustion in the hood of your car versus being somewhere else where you can have environmental standards placed.
Right.
Yeah.
And the real reason that it's so efficient is because the electric motor is so efficient compared to the IC engine. Right. But the bottom line is this: the world will use less energy if it went all electric. Okay, it'll use 1/3 the energy. Doesn't matter where the energy comes from.
And we're going to talk about that concept in another episode on oil demand, which is interesting, because what you're alluding to here is that if this is real and we hit these tipping points, oil demand will really react, and that tells you a lot about some environmental projections. Now, I feel pretty good on this concept far. Are there any parting shots you have in terms of concepts that you think we might have missed?
Yeah, only thing we didn't discuss is, if the price is about right, the consumer will vastly prefer, not even an environmental reason. An electric car is amazing. It's got a linear torque profile, which means from 0 to 50, it goes exactly in the same way as from 50 to 100. Okay, so there's no startup issues. So they love driving. Joining a freeway will be quick. So it's a very quick vehicle. So it's fun to drive, and your variable cost is lower. The amount you pay for the electricity, I don't care where you're in the world, even Netherlands where you are, where it's very expensive, you will be cheaper. You will be much cheaper than petrol.
Wow.
So it costs less. It's a more fun car to drive. What's the problem?
So, and you're not, because you're my father, I know you so well. You're not like a hype guy. You're not someone that says, okay, 3D printing's the next thing. You're not one of those people who get super hyped early in that adopter curve. You're more of a realist, or worse, I would say. So you, as a realist, you're saying, we're here. The tipping point is here. You're sitting in it. It might be this moment. Is that correct?
Within the one thing I said, the charging infrastructure.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the time. Excellent. Very clear. Again, please subscribe if you like the video, and we'll see you next time.